Hi, friend. I'm so glad that you're here for this chat with Ash. You're invited to join me in striving to better know and love God, walk in light of being known and loved by Him, and to make Him known as we share our stories. Some of ours are harder to share than others, but there's hope and beauty in every story because of the author who is doing a great work in and around us every day. Okay, hi everyone. If you are joining us for the first time, my name is Ashley Ivester. I'm the host here at Chats with Ash, and I'm excited because this season is all about God revealing Himself through various names and His attributes. And I am trying not to freak out because I have really special guests with me here today. This is Chris and Steph, and I saw on your website that you guys call yourself musicianaries. Is that right?
Yeah,
somebody called us that one day, and I just clung to it because I love it.
It's fantastic. I have to tell you, I have no idea, except the providence of God, how I came across your stuff. Like, it's one of those things. I know I've been following you for at least 2 years, and I know that because my husband and I were walking through our own really rough season in marriage, and you were one of those couples that somehow God placed before me, and I really wanted to unfollow you because your message wasn't what I wanted to hear. I wanted an escape, but I'm so thankful for your story and for your message and the way that God has used it to personally encourage my husband and I to hold fast, and God always proves Himself faithful. In previous episodes, we've talked about how the Lord is Jehovah Shammah, the Lord is there. We've discussed Jehovah Jireh as provider. And last week we heard from Carmen, and she talked about God, the great I am. And Chris and Steph, I sent you a list of His names and asked if one spoke to you, and you did choose one. You chose Jehovah Raah.
Yes, that was the shepherd.
Yes,
absolutely.
I love it. I'm curious, why is that the one that stuck out to you the most?
I think for both of us, that one, it ties so well into both of our journeys of faith. And we will get into what that journey is because it was pretty extreme. But I think just that idea of Him being this good shepherd is what we both needed. It's what we both experienced on very different journeys, so different. I think who God was to us and who we needed Him to be in our two separate paths. That the shepherd just really, it's just such a beautiful embodiment of who He was to us in that season.
I'm really intrigued about how you say, you were on two separate journeys, because when God gave me this idea of taking His names and looking for people's stories, I had it in my head that, there would be one story for each name, and it wasn't working out that way. And then I realized that's okay, because He's the same God, but He reveals Himself in so many different ways. And you can experience Him as a shepherd in one way and somebody else can in another. And I love that He's just unsearchable, undefinable. I don't know. That's not a word. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and He's so different. Like, the different names mean something different in different seasons of our life. I told you, like, we're going through a devotional right now with our kids, walking them through the different names of God. So I love that we get to be a part of this.
Yeah.
This thing you're doing.
We're learning all kinds of names of God that we didn't know.
We didn't even know.
El Emmet, El Elyon, Elkanah.
Yeah.
Jireh.
Trying to pronounce them sometimes is the biggest challenge.
Right.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, when I saw your message, I actually went on Amazon, because what can you not find on Amazon, and found our own devotional. So we have 3 boys, and they're ages 13, 10, and 9. And so they're loving it. And you have 2 kids, you said?
We do. Our son Asher is 8, and our daughter Nora is almost 7. She'll be 7 here in a couple weeks.
Fun ages, and they're close.
Yes, they're very close.
Yeah. Okay, so when did you 2 first meet?
Yeah, we'll launch in.
Okay.
We say this most interviews. We get on train tracks, telling our stories, kind of our thing. We're just good stewards, trying to be good stewards. We're just good stewards.
Oh boy.
We're just trying to be good stewards. So if you have a question, or you just raise your hand or interrupt us, we won't be offended at all.
Oh, go for it.
So we do tell our story everywhere we go, because like we always say, stories are powerful, and knowledge about who God is amazing, right? But hearing about what He does and what He has done in people's lives, man, there's just so much power in that. So we met when we were teenagers. We were in high
16
school.
and 17.
Oh, wow.
Yep, we met on a mission trip to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, of all places, and that sounds like the picture perfect place for this nice young Christian couple to meet.
That's what we do in the South,
right? Yeah.
We're here out in Nashville.
That's how the movie starts.
Yes.
Anyway. And Stephanie had a boyfriend at the time. That's also how the movie starts.
Just got that obstacle.
Got to introduce the conflict real early.
Anyway.
So I think, if I'm being honest, I think we knew that something was going on when we were on the trip. Stephanie
all right. Thank you.
Stephanie knew things were ending with this guy. So
a really serious 3-month relationship.
Yeah. So we got together after that trip, and we stayed together through our senior year. And in high school, we were talking about marriage when we were in high school.
In high school, yeah.
So we got married. We stayed
married halfway through college.
We stayed in the same town.
We did not get married in high school.
Stayed in the same town, went to college together, got married about halfway through college. And again, just kind of poster child Christian couple. I think we looked really good from the outside. It's even easier to make people think that you look really good from the outside now with our Instagram feeds and
That's for sure.
stuff like that. But that still was going on back then too. And I think we'd even kind of deceived ourselves a little bit. Because we were leading worship. We were serving in the church in all these different areas and finding ways to serve God together. And but we also were the first of our friend group to get married because we got married so young. So we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have any help. We didn't know that we should, be seeking out older couples or finding people who know more than we do.
Mentors,
mentors or counselors or therapists, whatever, just outside voices. We did not know to do that.
We were around people all the time. We were doing ministry. We felt like we're good. We're doing the right things, but we weren't truly living in community with people who were asking questions, and challenging us. So
you sound like the ideal couple. So did people look up to you and just kind of assume they're fine?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, probably. And even to take it even further, I was probably more of the musician, if you will, between the two of us.
It's never what I wanted to do with my life.
Really?
Ironically, no. I went and got my graduate degree in education.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's what she was going to school for. Yeah. I was going to school for music, and I was leading worship a lot, and
I was very comfortable in the background singing harmony.
Yeah. And throughout that time, it's a tumultuous time in your life for anyone. You're figuring out who you are. We're going to school. We're working, trying to make it through that. And we're trying to foster this young marriage. And, this whole fooling ourselves thing. I had this idea that because I was on stage in front of people in a position of leadership, that I had to have everything together. I had to be put together and understand and know everything. And I was going through this season of faith where I was having some pretty serious doubts and good questions, right? I'm not afraid of my doubt anymore, but boy, it sure was scary back then. And because I thought I had to have it all together to be in this leadership position, I just hid. And when we hide, it opens up the door for the enemy to move in.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened. I was, like I mentioned, in school for music, and there were plenty of things in the music industry for me to lose myself in. Music industry is not exactly known for its wholesomeness. So I found friends who were thinking and asking the same questions I was about God, and they're all artsy types and so I found some solace there, and I didn't really find a lot of solace in the church, mainly because I wasn't being honest about it, but also because nobody was talking about like these really serious existential questions about doubt and faith, and so all of that just kept progressing to the point where, because I'm hiding, because I'm not handling these thoughts, these doubts, well, they just fester. And it got to the point where I was still on stage, still leading worship, but I didn't even believe in God anymore, leading worship to a God I didn't believe in. Meanwhile, I was out the night before with friends doing, God knows what, drugs and drinking and parties and all that. So it was quite a conflicted time in my life, but somehow I still felt like I'm doing okay. I'm managing this pretty well, but I wasn't, because the next thing that happened was my defenses were completely down. This slow drip of the enemy slowly influencing me over time, convincing me that it's okay to hide, it's okay to do this and that. Then something even bigger came along, and so the ground was fertile, and it was the lie that I could be happy if I wasn't married and if I left the church, because that was what was holding me back. It couldn't possibly be that I'm living two separate lives and I'm basically a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It has to be this other thing, it has to be marriage. But it made sense at the time. So I followed through and listened to that voice, sadly. And I sat Stephanie down in January of 2010, and I told her 14 words. I said, I don't believe in God anymore, and I don't want to be married anymore. And then I went to a lawyer's office and signed papers and walked away.
So I have a question for you first, Chris, and then a question for you, Steph. When you sat down with her that day, how would you describe your emotional state? I mean, were you just numb? Were you resigned?
Mine? Oh man, I kind of felt like I had armor on, like I had prepared,
Yeah.
And there was some naivety in that too, because I'd been walking with this stuff for years, but I'm about to drop it on somebody who has no clue. So there's a lot of naivety, but a lot of I was on guard. I was ready, because I knew that this was going to be a big deal.
Wow. And that was my next question for you, Steph. I mean, when he says he's hiding it, you had no idea, right?
Right. I knew that he was having some struggles like with his faith, but I assumed a lot of things without pressing in. I assumed that he was working through it. I assumed we're busy. It's just a rough patch. Like I was finishing graduate school. Well, it'll get better. I just assumed. I had naively assumed that things would just get better.
Right.
Yeah. So when he said that, I was just in complete shock. Couldn't even function. Couldn't talk for like half an hour that night because I couldn't even process what was happening.
Right. I mean, okay, there's nothing that people love more than juicy gossip. Let's just say it. So,
Come on.
I mean, man, when this happened, this must have been like explosive in your church. Like,
So we, at that time, we had actually been going to a new church. We're relatively new, we were there long enough to be in a community group. And that was the first time that we had ever known what true community is. But at that point, Chris had already checked out, spiritually before we started that group, really, I think you'd say. But we are just so blessed. We're still at that church. It is a church that truly lives out the broken yet hopeful,
I love to hear
thing.
that.
And so they really rallied around us first. They prayed for him. They, our pastors wanted to meet with you. But yeah, it was out there for the world to see.
That had to be hard.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And he was a son to my parents. He'd been coming to Sunday lunch since the Sunday after the mission trip. So it was devastating for a lot more than just me, for sure.
I've had my own seasons and my own story where I've been in that place of just like not walking with God and going my own way and justifying. And when you talked about that armor, Chris, I'm like, I know that. After you told her and you walked away, what happened next?
Well, it didn't go like I thought it would. It certainly felt good for a while, though. because I'd been hiding for so long, and I finally told the truth. So that can feel really good, just in a human sort of way, not even in a faith sort of way. That's just a general principle of the universe that God made, is if we tell the truth and people know us, like, then there's something powerful about that. So sadly, that was where it ended for me. That was where the goodness ended, because I was running to a lie. I was running to something that could never and would never make me as happy or satisfied as I thought it would. But again, like I said, it did for a while. That forbidden fruit surely tastes sweet when we first touch it to our lips. But as it gets inside of us, it eats us alive, and kills us from the inside out. And that's what happened. It was more of what I thought would make me happy. Everything: drugs and parties and girls and relationships and girls who I felt like I could be myself with and not have to hide and all that. But it's no secret that is not a fulfilling life, and to make a long story short, you see the montage, I'm sure, in your head of that time of my life. It ended very poorly. It ended very poorly, and a relationship that I'd gotten into kind of exploded. And the way that it ended exposed a lot of things about me to myself, and kind of just pulled the veil off to where I was realizing, and kind of coming out of this fog of like, wow, I never wanted to hurt anybody. I never wanted to hurt Stephanie, but I still rationalized and justified a lot of things. And I could have done that a lot better. And it was a day late and a dollar short, because I'd pushed everybody away. Now I'm alone. I'm waking up in cold sweats. I'm battling anxiety. There's like physical pain that I'm battling because of like just this implosion of my life and what I thought it was going to be and what it should be and what it ended up as when I sat in the driver's seat. So it was during that time I just started, I honestly just had nowhere else to go. And I never said, hey, I will never believe there is a God. There is not a God. It was just, he felt far away and unapproachable, and I never really could, I never felt like I could truly know that he was there, if he was there. But our brokenness has a way of stripping some of the things that we think are important that sometimes aren't as important. And buried beneath that intellectualism and doubt and arguments and all of that, buried beneath all of that was a heart of mine, right? Mm-hmm. And that was what he used to get to me. He didn't need to find some argument that would convince me that he was real. He found me through my failure, through my brokenness, and through how alone and lost I was. And I cried out to him. And man, that was my rock bottom. And thank God, when my heart was broken, it broke open, and I was, receptive to that message. And man, I just started pouring out to him, and everything I felt like I couldn't say before, all the things I felt like I had to hide before, it's all there, and it's with God, before God, and he's pouring back in as I'm pouring out. And this is only 8 months or so after Stephanie and I had, split. So, and it went on, the season of renewal kind of went on for weeks and turned into longer than that. But during that time, I'm opening the Word, I'm seeing things I've never seen before. Old friends are kind of coming back around and hearing that things are happening, and I start to hear this whisper. But it was unlike the whisper I heard from the enemy before telling me I should leave. But even still, I ignored it because it seemed a little too crazy and a little unbelievable. But the voice, not audible, but the whisper turned into basically a yell to this message, this thing I'm hearing from God that I still to this day don't know I could ever say I've heard or felt God saying a message so powerfully. And that message was that I should pursue Stephanie again.
Yep.
Oh, is that? So where
Who was on a different page.
A very different journey, yeah. For sure.
I'm
And I
sitting
love, I would say I love going back to, God being the shepherd, like for you, like he was that shepherd that left the 99 for the one, that's his story. Mine was not. Like my story, I'm not the rebellious one, right? Like I wasn't the one that chose to leave. This wasn't my fault. I had this whole other side of the journey where it was way easier to play the victim and justify it. But then God very graciously showed me that there was work he needed to do in my heart. It was sin that was just as ugly. It was just pride. And man, what I experienced that year, and I could talk forever and I won't, and please, any listeners who want to know more about my side of the journey, find us on socials. I'd love to talk to you. But for me, my experience with this good shepherd is the experience of knowing what it feels like to let go. Because I think I just clung so hard to everything. I clung to trying to force him to stay, to make something happen, I was just so independent and self-reliant. And I think getting to a place, it took a long time. I was dealing with a lot of shame and hurt and just grief just from walking through something like that. But knowing and learning who God was through that process, seeing his faithfulness over and over again, reading the scriptures of how he wasn't going to waste any of my pain or my trials, knowing, like, as I'm thinking through, like, all of Psalm 23, like, having a shepherd who was going to so gently guide me through it all, that was everything. That was everything for me. For somebody who's always been so self-sufficient, to walk through something that I have no control over and I can't change, to know that I can experience that peace and that rest, even in the middle of the valley, right? Like in the middle of the trials, and know that I'm going to be taken care of because I'm with him. Whether this ending, obviously, spoiler, we are together. So obviously something happened, but even without that ending, both of us having this experience with him, knowing that if that's where it ended, like that would have been enough because of what we experienced, that love from the Father.
That's powerful to say that would have been enough. I am a romantic at heart, but I'm also fiercely passionate. And so, Steph, as you share your story and you're talking about how God was revealing the sin in your own heart and your need for him, I'm sitting here thinking, I would have been like, Lord, bring down the fire and kill that man. Like, did you go through that rage? And what did you learn about God if you did?
Sure. I mean, there was anger. If you're an Enneagram person, I am in the anger triad. So there was definitely that. But I went through every emotion that you go through. All of it. But I think, just learning, like I said, just learning that God can, first of all, he can handle my emotions, and I've always been one, I'm an Enneagram 1, if you're wondering. So I'm very, like, I process my emotions. I keep down the bad ones that are bad, quote, in my head. So I'm very thoughtful about presenting the right, version of myself or doing the right thing. And so learning that God can handle my frustration, look at the Psalms, David just like questioning God, why? Like, we wrote a song called Take This that's about my side of, like, God, where are you? Like, where is this peace that you have promised me? Because I don't feel it at all. But again, just learning that he has a purpose. Like, he is still good no matter the ending. He's still good even though I'm feeling pain. Like, he's still and will always be faithful no matter what we're walking through.
Even saying, I thought of something as you were talking. It's more of your story, but thinking about this idea of a shepherd and, the leaving the 99, we've all heard the Corey Asbury song. That's obviously like the shepherd thing, but there's also this idea of, like, a shepherd obviously knows more than a sheep does, right? And a sheep could injure themselves, right?
Yeah.
And the shepherd would take the sheep, let's say the bone is broken, right? In this case, maybe it's Stephanie who is broken. I'm broken too, but here we go. Gonna have to set that bone. That's gonna hurt. Like, you're going to cause more pain. This is going to hurt. Sheep, you're not gonna understand this. You're gonna hate this. It's not gonna make sense, but it's gonna be for your good, right? And that's the kind of shepherd that we also saw, not just in Stephanie's story, but just in our marriage. We had to be broken so that we could be healed. There had to be pain and suffering for there to be transformation. And it doesn't work any other way, sadly, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think we kind of left y'all hanging with our story. So to sum up why we're even together.
You went on the tangent about about shepherds, and I was
it.
like, man, let's just go with it.
It's deep.
They know we're together. We're here today. It's fine.
Yeah, because, I mean, obviously the restoration process is a huge part of our story and one that we talk about frequently. But for us, when Chris came to me 8 months after we had been separated, we hadn't been talking, and he said, we talked for a couple hours. It was this really beautiful time of me seeing this just transparency and vulnerability in him that I don't know that I'd ever seen, and hearing about how God had been showing up, and then he shared that God told him we should be together again, and I
Poor timing.
did not just jump right on board and say, "Yep, told me that too," because I could not tell you that God had told me that. So
I believe that I did it. I just still to this day find it so hard to believe I was so just dumb to do.
You're just like,
Yeah.
2 hours is enough of a conversation to get back together, right?
Yeah, like I said, I believe that I did it. It's just so hard. It's so crazy.
So we spent a few months separately in that season after that first meeting of doing counseling, of involving our community, our church to be praying for us, and came together with the counselor at the end of those few months, and everybody was in agreement that we should pursue this again. And God is, the heartbeat of the Bible, is this beautiful picture and story of redemption, and we believe that he could do that in our marriage too. So,
and even just the silly idea of me saying, you know what, I fumbled the ball. I felt God definitely told me to do this, but man, I really fumbled the ball on putting it into action. But we can't screw up what God wants to do, right? I couldn't screw that up. Just taking steps. All I did was take a step, towards what I felt like God was calling me to, and we stumbled into the best marriage of our lives. That's completely transformed and so different than what it was to begin
absolutely. And we are not here to say that our marriage is perfect now and this is the end. We still have to work every day.
We're still stumbling into it.
Yeah, as it is with a walk of faith, it takes intentionality. It takes pursuing, each other here and pursuing the Lord. Like, neither of those relationships work on the back burner. It takes work, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it.
What was your biggest fear stepping back into it after everything?
That's a great question. Do you have an answer?
I can answer. I think, obviously, initially, trust, it just takes time. It takes time to rebuild trust when it's been lost. And, from my side, if anybody who has dealt with any sort of betrayal, of any kind like that, it takes time. There's just, you can't rush it. You can't rush the process. And we had a really great counselor and really great community that, I don't know that I was living, I think I look back, I'm like, wow, why was I not more fearful? Because I could just see how easily that, and hearing from all these people that talk to us every day about how hard it is rebuilding that trust. But for whatever reason, I'm grateful that was not a huge struggle. But obviously, there are always these, for us it was mostly early on, but these triggers of like, well, what if this doesn't stick? If he fell from the Lord before, like, what happens if something else hard comes up? Or, he said when he left that we were just too different. Well, our personalities didn't change, so what's going to be different? But again, God was just so gracious to show us over and over again, like, yeah, your differences, like, they really kind of pushed you apart before, but but somehow they're working together so beautifully in a way that we never could have imagined. That, you know, now 10 years later, like, our unique gifts and things that are so different are what make us able to have a full-time music ministry. Like, we couldn't do it without the others. So that was a long answer for sort of a question that I answered, but
it was great.
You did it.
It was great. I mean, when I think about fear and I'm listening to your story, I mean, Chris, it takes such courage to put your story out there, and I respect that so much with both of you. But it also shows the character of the shepherd, because as humans, you know, we think, well, I screwed up and it's too much and there's no redemption. And I mean, in the season of my life where I walked away from God and I did some really horrible things, and I can remember thinking, I can't even pray to you because there's no way you could love me. And so for someone out there that might be maybe having a secret something and they feel that shame and that fear, what would you say to them?
Ooh.
Sorry, I'm throwing big ones at you.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Our one of our flagship things is we always say, no one is too far gone. No one.
What would I say? I would say something. You could say something to me if you wanted to. I think to somebody who's walking around and hiding, and probably dealing with a lot of shame, but probably also with justification and rationalization, and I'm okay, and this is okay. I think maybe it would be just, hey, take a step back, and realize that we are really, really good at deceiving ourselves. We're really, really good at convincing ourselves and telling ourselves stories. That's kind of what we do. That's kind of what we are. We are storytellers in our own minds of our reality. And the story that we tell ourselves is often not true. And the story that you're probably hearing, is probably from the enemy telling you that you're not good enough, that you're unlovable, that people, if they knew the real you, that they wouldn't love you. It's not true. It's not true. God, if Scripture is nothing if it's not a collection of people who aren't good enough for God to use and to work with.
Just look at the Scripture.
Right.
And so you are good enough. You are lovable, and that's what Jesus came to show. A God of infinite power coming down to earth saying, hey, I'm here with you. I am with you. You are lovable. Yeah.
It's almost like the brokenness is a gift because it makes us realize how awesome he is. Like that, how could he love us? How could he forgive us? How could he give us this awesome new beginning and change the story? It's incredible. So you now together, you have music that you create, which I'm in awe of. I love listening to music. I love writing. And so I'm inspired by people that write music because I'm like, how do you say so much with so little? I use way too many words. You have a new song.
I still don't know how it happens sometimes.
It's awesome. You have a new song that you just released, Rest, which I've been playing on repeat. And I'd love to know what inspired you to write that.
Man, that song was born out of,
Started with a verse.
It started with a verse, but really the inspiration for it was, it's coming out of the pandemic, and I think people are kind of tired of hearing about songs and projects from the pandemic. But, even before that happened, mental health and anxiety and depression and these mental health issues, they were at the forefront of the cultural conversation. And we have dear friends and family members who struggle with that. And obviously I've had a bout with that myself, not an ongoing thing, but it really just, I think it's just a passion of ours too, for people to know and learn and understand the rest and peace of God that, just like the pre-chorus to that song says, like, we can't stop the chaos around us, but we can surrender what's in us. And I think that's kind of the driving passion, is we get so many people who come to us who are in shambles, like their marriages are falling apart. It's crazy. We love that we are, but we're a magnet for that because of our own vulnerability and our story. And we watch so many people flounder and suffer. And suffering's not it's not that we want to avoid suffering. We want to view it correctly and not just languish in it, right? And so we see people languishing a lot of times, and it breaks our heart, and we want people to know and understand what that real peace and rest of Jesus is.
Rest is such a good word too to go with the image of a shepherd, and just being able to rest with him. So that's so awesome.
Look at that.
You have mentioned several times community, and I want to touch on this real quick before you need to go, because that's so powerful. I mean, I just walked through a really, really rough year and a half, and I struggled with suicidal thoughts, and just isolation was such a big part of that. So when you talk about community, my ears are on alert. So we're not supposed to be alone.
We're not. No, we are not supposed to walk this road. I mean, just being a human, it's not. We're not meant to be alone, but especially in a life of faith, we're just not meant to do it alone. And in our marriage, with it falling apart, like, you have to have other people speaking into your life. And if you're not living in true, authentic community, they can't do that. And also, you're probably not going to be open to hear it when people do. So it is crucial. It has been one of the most life-giving things for us in the last 10 years at our church, is just small groups are a huge emphasis at our church. It's just so important. We can't say it. We can't say it enough.
I always go super deep and existential, theological, but my mind just immediately went to who God actually is, like as a Trinity. It's a plurality, right? And God is relationship, right? That's this self-giving, submissive, relational entity that is one thing, and that is God. And Jesus's prayer was that we would be one as he and the Father are one. So this community, this relationship, this union with each other and with him, there is I don't think there is a life of faith apart from that, apart from having others who know you, know the real you, who love you, and you know that and can receive that.
Yeah, and that's real intimacy. I mean, you talked about your marriage before when you were hiding things, and then suddenly everything was revealed, and you guys have this intimacy that you didn't have, which is beautiful.
Yeah, and there's so much safety that comes with that, like safety that in a marriage, but also just in, I think about our small group now, like there's so much safety in being raw and being real with a group of people. It's priceless.
It is. I am so incredibly grateful for the community that God gives us within our local bodies, but also just like internet and social media has been awesome how he's using it. And I've loved meeting you, and I really appreciate you sharing your story, and I'm praying that God will use it and that we all come to know the shepherd on a deeper level as we walk with him.
Yes. So thank you so much. And anybody who has any questions for us, please find us on socials, Out of the Dust Music, or our website, outofthedustmusic.com. We'd love to walk with you.
Yep, thank you. Thank you so much. You guys, I will see you next time on Chats with Ash. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed our chat. And if you did, I would be honored if you would take just a moment to subscribe and share. You can also catch up with me during the week at ashleyivester.com. I can't wait for our next talk, but until then, go and grow in grace.